Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer Wednesday poem. I'm Robin Shuckburgh, and firstly, I must thank you all for watching our poems and the kind things so many of you have said about them. We're having a great deal of fun producing them, and they're just beginning to make a little money for the Red Cross. Now, the more you can share these posts and persuade your friends to watch them, the more we'll be able to contribute to the Red Cross, so please do let everyone know. Now, several of you have suggested we read your favourite poets, so in response to that today, we've settled on the man so many of you mentioned, the great American poet Robert Frost, who wrote about rural life where he lived in New England in the early 20th century. Frost was hugely feted by his compatriots, indeed all over the world, winning 4 Pulitzer Prizes. He acquired an honorary degree from Harvard University, along with others from Bates College and Dartmouth College, as well as Cambridge and Oxford universities in the United Kingdom. Several colleges and universities have named their libraries after him. And in 1961, at the grand old age of 86, he spoke and performed a reading of his poetry at the inauguration of American President John F. Kennedy. Now, whilst Frost came from English stock, his ancestors emigrated to New Hampshire in 1634. He was born and raised in San Francisco, moving with his mother to Massachusetts after the death of his father. His poetry was first published in his high school magazine, but it was in 1913 in England that he first found a publisher for a collection of his work. He'd moved his entire family here, believing evidently correctly that the literary world in England at the time was more conducive to his chances of success. He went back to America in 1915 at the onset of the First World War, where he managed to buy a farm in New Hampshire, from where he launched his phenomenally successful career of teaching, writing, and lecturing. He died in January 1963, and on this frosty Oxfordshire day, almost exactly 60 years later, in March 2023, with a scattering of snow on the ground, I'm going to read to you an appropriate short poem called A Hillside Thaw by Robert Frost. To think to know the country, and now know the hillside on the day the sun lets go 10 million silver lizards out of snow. As often I've seen it done before, I can't pretend to tell the way it's done. It looks as if some magic of the sun lifted the rug that bred them on the floor, and the light breaking on them made them run. But if I thought to stop the wet stampede and caught one silver lizard by the tail, and put my foot on one without avail, and threw myself wet-elbowed and wet-kneed in front of 20 others wriggling speed, in the confusion of them all a-glitter, and birds that joined in the excited fun by doubling and redoubling song and twitter, I have no doubt I'd end up holding none. It takes moon for this. The sun's a wizard by all I tell, but so's the moon a witch. From the high west she makes a gentle cast, and suddenly, without a jerk or twitch, she has her spiel on every single lizard. I fancied when I looked at 6 o'clock the swarm still ran and scuttled just as fast. The moon was waiting for her chill effect. I looked at 9, the swarm was turned to rock in every lifelike posture of the swarm, transfixed on mountain slopes almost erect. Across each other and side by side they lay. The spell that so could hold them as they were was wrought through trees without a breath of storm to make a leaf, if there had been one, stir. One lizard at the end of every ray. The thought of my attempting such a stray. I am so excited to be able to introduce to you our first guest. To those of you who come from England, you will know who she is within 2 words of her starting. For those of you living abroad, you're more likely perhaps to recognise her since she was the main anchor presenter for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations last year. She's chosen a wonderful poem written by William Morris in the house behind me, which is Kelmscott Manor. It's a fantastically beautiful poem. She recorded it for us on her telephone. She is the inimitable Kirsty Young.
I've chosen this piece for, mainly 2 reasons. One is that it's written about probably my absolute favourite time of year, when the world is turning from an unreliable summer into a wonderful, rich autumn. And the other reason is that it is written about a beautiful little village that's not far at all from where I live. Kelmscott Crabapples by William Morris. Fair is the world now autumn's wearing, and the sluggard sun lies long abed. Sweet are the days, now winter's nearing, and all winds feign that wind is dead. Dumb is the hedge where the crabs hang yellow, bright as the blossoms of the spring. Dumb is the close where the pears grow mellow, and none but the dauntless redbreasts sing. Fair was the spring, but amidst his greening, grey were the days of the hidden sun. Fair was the summer, but overweening, so soon his o'ersweet days were done. Come then, love, for peace is upon us. Far off is failing, and far is fear. Here where the rest in the end hath won us is the garnering tide of the happy year. Come from the grey old house by the water, where far from the lips of the hungry sea green groweth the grass o'er the field of slaughter, and all is a tale for thee and me.
Now, as I hope you all now realise, any money that comes from Google as a result of your watching the Wednesday poems, along of course with the tiresome but lucrative advertisements, will go to the British Red Cross. This is the amazing organisation that since the 1870s has gone pretty much unheralded into all zones of conflict and disaster, and is at the moment extremely stretched. So please share this with everyone you can think of. It's not too arduous a task to listen to a poem, particularly when our famous guests are reading them, as we hope they will be regularly over the months. And each time anybody listens, a few pennies will accumulate until we hope we will have made a meaningful contribution to the massive financial burden the Red Cross faces. Now, by a complete coincidence, the wonderful Kirsty Young, who read the poem last week, chose one written by William Morris, who lived in Kelmscott Manor. My choice this week, planned many weeks ago, has a very close association with Morris and his lovely manor house. It's a story of Arthurian legend, a lyrical ballad by the 19th century English poet Alfred Lord Tennyson. It's inspired by the 13th century Italian short prose text, Donna di Scalotta. The poem tells the tragic story of Elaine of Astolat, a young noblewoman stranded in a tower up the river from Camelot. Tennyson wrote 2 versions of this poem, one published in 1833, the other 9 years later, and this is the latter version. The medieval romanticism of the poem inspired many painters, in particular the Pre-Raphaelites and their followers, who formed, of course, a crucial part of William Morris's group of friends and supporters. Several members of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood made paintings based on episodes from the poem, and the 2 aspects of the story they particularly were intrigued by are the idea of the lady trapped in the tower and the dying girl floating down the river towards Camelot. This is The Lady of Shalott by Alfred Lord Tennyson. On either side the river lie long fields of barley and of rye that clothe the wold and meet the sky, and through the field the road runs by to many-towered Camelot. And up and down the people go, gazing where the lilies blow, round an island there below, the island of Shalott. Willows whiten, aspens quiver, little breezes dusk and shiver, through the wave that runs forever by the island in the river, flowing down to Camelot. 4 grey walls and 4 grey towers overlook a space of flowers, and the silent isle embowers the Lady of Shalott. By the margin, willow-veiled, slide the heavy barges trailed by slow horses, and unhailed the shallop flitteth silken-sailed, skimming down to Camelot. But who hath seen her wave her hand, or at the casement seen her stand? Or is she known in all the land, the Lady of Shalott? Only reapers, reaping early in among the bearded barley, hear a song that echoes cheerly from the river, winding clearly down to towered Camelot. And by the moon the reaper weary, piling sheaves in uplands airy, listening whispers, "'Tis the fairy Lady of Shalott." There she weaves by night and day a magic web with colours gay. She has heard a whisper say, a curse is on her if she stay to look down to Camelot. She knows not what the curse may be, and so she weaveth steadily, and little other care hath she, the Lady of Shalott. And moving through a mirror clear that hangs before her all the year, shadows of the world appear. There she sees the highway near, winding down to Camelot. There the river eddy whirls, and there the surly village churls, and the red cloaks of market girls pass onward from Shalott. Sometimes a troop of damsels glad, an abbot on an ambling pad, sometimes a curly shepherd lad, or long-haired page in crimson clad, goes by to towered Camelot. And sometimes through the mirror blue the knights come riding 2 and 2. She hath no loyal knight and true, the Lady of Shalott. But in her web she still delights to weave the mirror's magic sights. For often through the silent nights a funeral with plumes and lights and music went to Camelot. Or when the moon was overhead, came 2 young lovers lately wed. I am half sick of shadows, said the Lady of Shalott. A bowshot from her bower eaves, he rode between the barley sheaves. The sun came dazzling through the leaves, and flamed upon the brazen greaves of bold Sir Lancelot. A red-crossed knight for ever kneeled to a lady in his shield, that sparkled on the yellow field beside remote Shalott. The gemmy bridle glittered free, like to some branch of stars we see hung in the golden galaxy. The bridle bells rang merrily as he rode down to Camelot. And from his blazoned baldric slung a mighty silver bugle hung, and as he rode his armour rung beside remote Shalott. All in the blue unclouded weather, thick jewelled shone the saddle leather. The helmet and the helmet feather burned like one burning flame together as he rode down to Camelot. As often through the purple night, below the starry clusters bright, some bearded meteor trailing light moves over still Shalott. His broad clear brow in sunlight glowed, on burnished hooves his warhorse trode. From underneath his helmet flowed his coal-black curls as on he rode down to Camelot. From the bank and from the river he flashed into the crystal mirror. Tirra lirra by the river sang Sir Lancelot. She left the web, she left the loom, she made 3 paces through the room. She saw the water lily bloom, she saw the helmet and the plume. She looked down to Camelot. Out flew the web and floated wide. The mirror cracked from side to side. "The curse is come upon me," cried the Lady of Shalott. In the stormy east wind straining, the pale yellow woods were waning, the broad stream in his banks complaining, heavily the low sky raining over towered Camelot. Down she came and found a boat beneath a willow left afloat, and round about the prow she wrote, "The Lady of Shalott." And down the river's dim expanse, like some bold seer in a trance, seeing all his own mischance, with a glassy countenance, did she look to Camelot. And at the closing of the day, she loosed the chain, and down she lay. The broad stream bore her far away, the Lady of Shalott. Lying robed in snowy white, that loosely flew from left and right, the leaves upon her falling light, through the noises of the night, she floated down to Camelot. And as the boathead wound along the willowy hills and fields among, they heard her singing her last song, the Lady of Shalott. Heard a carol, mournful, holy, chanted loudly, chanted lowly, till her blood was frozen slowly, and her eyes were darkened wholly, turned to towered Camelot. For ere she reached upon the tide the first house by the waterside, singing in her song she died, the Lady of Shalott. Under tower and balcony, by garden wall and gallery, a gleaming shape she floated by, dead pale between the houses high, silent into Camelot. Out upon the wharfs they came, knight and burgher, lord and dame, and round the prow they read her name, the Lady of Shalott. Who is this, and what is here? And in the lighted palace near died the sound of royal cheer, and they crossed themselves for fear, all the knights at Camelot. But Lancelot mused a little space. He said, "She has a lovely face. God in his mercy lend her grace, the Lady of Shalott." Time for a poet who, perhaps above all others, understood and described the English countryside. John Clare. He was born in 1793 to humble, almost illiterate parents, and he grew up in the Northamptonshire village of Helpston, and he made the surrounding countryside his world. His formal education, such as it was, ended when he was 11 years old, but he had a thirst for knowledge and became a model example of the self-taught man. As a poet of rural England, he has few rivals. His first volume, Poems Descriptive of Rural Life and Scenery, was published in 1820, and it was a huge success, but sadly, his contemporaries were less enthusiastic about his subsequent work, and he died in 1864 in a tragic state of penury and complete mental collapse. This is On a Lane in Spring by John Clare. A little lane the brook runs close beside, and spangles in the sunshine while the fish glide swiftly by. And hedges leafing with the green spring tide, from out their greenery the old birds fly, and chirp and whistle in the morning sun. The pilewort glitters 'neath the pale blue sky. The little robin has its nest begun, and grass-green linnets round the bushes fly. How mild the spring comes in! The daisy buds lift up their golden blossoms to the sky. How lovely are the pingles and the woods! Here a beetle runs, and there a fly rests on the arum leaf in bottle green, and all the spring in this sweet lane is seen. Today's poem is The Enkindled Spring by D.H. Lawrence. A controversial figure, born in 1885, Lawrence was an English novelist, short story writer and poet. His best-known novels, Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, Women in Love, and Lady Chatterley's Lover, are well known for being the subject of censorship trials for what at the time were their radical portrayals of sexuality and the use of explicit language. He started writing poetry at the age of 20 and wrote nearly 800 in his lifetime. And this one is a particular favourite of mine, as the picture it paints is so perfectly familiar. The Enkindled Spring by D.H. Lawrence. This spring, as it comes, bursting up in bonfires green, wild puffing of emerald trees and flame-filled bushes, thorn blossom lifting in wreaths of smoke between where the wood fumes up and the watery flickering rushes. I am amazed at this spring, this conflagration of green fires lit on the soil of the earth, this blaze of growing, and sparks that puff in wild gyration, faces of people streaming across my gaze. And I, what fountain of fire am I among this leaping combustion of spring? My spirit is tossed about like a shadow buffeted in the throng of flames, a shadow that's gone astray and is lost. Those wreaths of thorn blossom smoke are all over the fields of Oxfordshire and Gloucestershire at the moment. Spring is certainly upon us. Thanks for listening, and please share this if you can, as the more who listen to the poems, the more we can send to the Red Cross. We'll be back next Wednesday. Goodbye. And I'm going to finish this month's Wednesday poems with some lines written in early spring by William Wordsworth, who I know will need no introduction whatever. I heard 1,000 blended notes, while in a grove I sat reclined, in that sweet mood when pleasant thoughts bring sad thoughts to the mind. To her fair works did nature link the human soul that through me ran, and much it grieved my heart to think what man has made of man. Through primrose tufts in that green bower the periwinkle trailed its wreaths, and 'tis my faith that every flower enjoys the air it breathes. The birds around me hopped and played, their thoughts and I cannot measure, but the least motion which they made, it seemed a thrill of pleasure. The budding twigs spread out their fan to catch the breezy air, and I must think, do all I can, that there was a pleasure there. If this belief from heaven be sent, if such be nature's holy plan, have I not reason to lament what man has made of man? A poignant end to March 23, when the world seems to have gone completely dotty. See you next week.